Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Scott. Watching the weather a little bit, but doing good. Seems to have turned in our favor, so that's good.
That's great.
Actually, by the time this airs, nobody will know what we're talking about, will they?
Well, kidding aside, yes, right. Hopefully. I tell you, our thoughts and prayers certainly go out to all the folks across the Southeast dealing with yet another storm. So, but on a much lighter note, Greg, looking forward to a great show here today as we're going to be talking about really forward-looking procurement leadership and its impact on organizations and industry in today's ever-changing environment. Should be a great show, huh?
Always. I love talking about leadership and particularly all this procurement and supply chain jazz. It seems like suddenly people are interested in that.
And that's a great thing. So with that said, no further ado, I'd like to welcome in our esteemed guest here today, Johnathan Foster, Senior Director of Procurement with Lanter Delivery Systems. Johnathan, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing lovely. Yourself, sir?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for your time here today. Can't wait for your perspective. And of course, Robert Mietus, Managing Director for Central for OMNIA Partners. Robert, how you doing?
Doing well. It's a beautiful day here in Chicago, so can't complain.
Man, from one of our favorite global cities in Chicago. You've already got all kinds of food memories going through my mind. Thank you so much, Robert, making us hungry. Okay, so what we want to do, kind of continue on that theme, want to get to know you all a little bit better. We've enjoyed the pre-show conversation. Of course, we've enjoyed a variety of conversations with our friends at OMNIA Partners. Johnathan, welcome to the family here. So let's get to know you all a little better. And Johnathan, we'll start with you. So tell us where you grew up and give us some of your anecdotes from your upbringing, Johnathan.
I'm from North Central Arkansas, middle of the Ozarks, what I affectionately call God's country. So beautiful place to be from, especially in the fall. And my family, very, I guess, would say humble beginnings, in that they very blue collar, centered around the logging industry. And I find a lot of those mindsets of that hard work still permeate today in my day-to-day. I like to say I'm bringing a blue-collar mindset to a white-collar world a lot of time.
Oh, I love that, Greg.
Yeah. That's a beautiful part of the country. So when I was younger, I lived in Springfield, Missouri, and we went to the Ozarks, Bull Shoals, all up and down the White River all the time. So it is a really, truly beautiful part of the country, and definitely can relate to that hardworking thing. So you're not likely to be a quiet quitter, are you?
No, sir. No, sir.
Going back to your comment there, Johnathan, about kind of bringing that blue collar mentality to work. There was a great defensive coordinator for Virginia Tech, and his name's going to escape me right now, but he brought his whole moniker was like bringing this lunchbox, and it was like a analogy he taught with his team. Day in and day out, you got to bring it every single day. So I love that. I love what your upbringing taught you. So I got to ask you one more question before I flip over to Robert. So growing up in Arkansas, what is one food dish or meal or restaurant or whatever that was inseparable from your upbringing, Johnathan?
Biscuits and gravy.
Biscuits and gravy.
My grandma's table, my mama's table, wherever. Throw me some biscuits and gravy, and you got a happy balding Southern guy. So a bald Southern guy now.
Oh man, I love it. Okay, so now that we're really starving for lunch, thank you so much, Johnathan. Robert, same question. Tell us where you grew up and kind of give us some of the flavor of your upbringing too.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I born and raised here in the Chicagoland area. I guess similar to Johnathan, my parents were blue collar. Dad was a master mechanic, station engineer for a corrugated box plant. My mom was a cleaning lady. Actually, I had jobs with my dad starting in high school. So, I did random maintenance work around the plant. And then whenever my uncle worked there too. So whenever he went out and took a break, I was the machine operator for the jumbo corrugated machine. Probably can't do that these days, but learned a lot through that experience.
Oh, that is so cool. What a special experience, Greg.
Yeah.
I mean, be able to work with your dad day in and day out at the plant, right?
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
also with big machinery, what's better for a kid, right, than getting it's like a full-size toy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Those things. That's awesome.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
same question as a follow-up question, Robert. I bet
Here
growing
it
up in the
comes. We're going to
Chicago,
talk food in Chicago, aren't we?
got to, man, got to.
But how much time do we got?
Yeah, right.
So to help narrow it down, growing up in Chicagoland, what a special upbringing that is as well. What's one food dish inseparable from your childhood?
Oh, sure. So I guess every Chicago, let's say suburb or location has their special pizza dish, right? And it's different than the next town over, different than nobody's ever heard of it, but it kind of brings you back to your childhood, so to speak. So I'd say Phil's Pizza down on 87th and State Road is my local pizza joint.
Love that. Shout out to Phil, Greg. Phil's Pizza.
Hey, you know what? It's good to hear about some of the other places besides the usual stops, right? There's no shortage of outstanding food in Chicago, and pizza has to be the top.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. And then just to add on to that, Chicago's grown up from pizza and hot dogs. I would say we're one of the best culinary cities in the world. So we've got, the best of the best.
That's right.
Got my vote.
Come and stop by.
But I'm not sleeping, and I'd suggest you don't sleep on biscuits and gravy. So, Johnathan, we're going to have to make a trip back to Arkansas and enjoy and break some bread there. Okay. Well, hey, thanks for giving us a chance to get to know you a little better and letting our audience get to know you both a little better. Where are we going next, Greg, with the dynamic duo here?
We probably ought to find out what these guys do for a living at some point, don't you think?
Sounds good.
So maybe we can start with you, Robert. Give us an idea, what your role is, and tell us a little bit about OMNIA, and maybe share some of the basics around GPOs and that kind of thing.
Oh, I'd be happy to. So I basically help companies, enterprise level companies, so Fortune 1000s typically, leverage a group purchasing organization. So just to kind of give you a quick version of GPO 101, a group purchasing organization leverages the spend of its members to get better pricing, terms and conditions than they can get on their own. So just for some context, we have over $15 billion to spend going through OMNIA that we leverage, and we're typically going to be the top customer of our supplier partners. So not only are we delivering a great, call it price up front, but we're also making sure that our members are customers of choice. So we expect that you get, great programs and great service as part of it. And then we have resources to support solutioning and the drive for continuous improvement over the course of the program, so that not only are you seeing, day one savings in terms of piece price, but we're also identifying, how do we improve the program from demand consumption, improve service levels? Is there a better way? Standardization, harmonization, depending on the category, there's lots of ways to drive down total cost of ownership, and in some cases improve, even some revenue streams for companies. So, my role and responsibility is working with companies, especially on the front end of our engagement and relationship, to truly partner and identify how to unlock all those resources and best utilize the model to improve the return on effort within our model.
Mm.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about GPOs and a lot with some of your colleagues, and it is just fascinating. Some of the stories, some of the benefits that companies have got. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about what you can expect and what you can get out of a GPO.
Greg, I was just going to say,
Johnathan, Go ahead.
What came to mind as he was explaining that is, that old phrase, "It takes a village." But then what do you do when you have the village? You got to leverage the village, right? And bring that the power of the numbers to bear. So I love that. And looking forward to learning a lot more from your perspective, Robert. Greg?
Johnathan, I see that you are consuming the real fuel of the supply chain and procurement industry, coffee. That's what really keeps supply chain moving.
100%.
So we know a little bit about you, but tell us a little bit about your role at your group, and and a little bit about how you guys started working together. You have a great story about what you brought to your current company, so can't wait to hear you have the audience hear you share that.
So about 16, 17 months ago, I was a consultant for a pretty large procurement organization. I led the U.S. supply chain and logistics part of their practice, and I heard about this opportunity to start a procurement organization within a relatively mid-tier company that had never formally created the function. Heard about an amazing leader who I work for, but it was really the challenge that I think we all look for, and really an interesting company that I had been in the logistics space. This will be my 22nd year, so I affectionately call Lanter the biggest company I'd never heard of, and they grew organically. And it's really an amazing story where we deliver 1.5 million packages a week, and most people, besides the automotive, the ag, and the heavy truck that we deliver parts in the middle of the night for, really didn't know us. But we had grown, and our CEO likes to say we jumped in and figured it out. Our company's really good about jumping in and figuring it out. But what my leader and a couple others recognized is we could take and embrace procurement and supply chain differently. So they created a role. They hired me. And it was, for me, I came in and it was, they said, it's a green field. Figure out how you want to do it. Well, I have a corny saying, and maybe it's still the consultant in me, but I like it. And it really goes to this saying is, everybody wants to talk about best in class. But before you can be best, you got to get better first. And I like that. I like that approach. And the fastest way to get better is to embrace the GPOs, especially when you're so immature like we were. So I knew coming into this role that I had done business with other GPOs, and I knew that I was going to compete and actively solicit GPO partners. I'll be honest, I didn't know OMNIA, but as I was leaving the procurement consultancy one of my peers said, "Hey, don't sleep on OMNIA." And then as I got here and as I was doing it, one of my former mentors said, "Hey, OMNIA, you need to look at OMNIA when you're looking at these companies." I like to use these things on the side of my head, not just the one on the front, and get my ego out of the way. And so these are people I listen to, and so I pursued OMNIA, at least an introduction. I competed for GPOs, all great companies, but based on maturity, based on entry, barriers to entry, based on just cultural fit within my organization, it was very clear that OMNIA was the right partner for me. And if I've got anything right in the first 15 months, I got it right. And they have embodied what I needed as a partner. So,
Man, starting from scratch, it sounds overwhelming, but it's almost a blessing in disguise because you don't have any baggage as such, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious. There are so many companies that are probably in the position you were, probably not the size that Lanter is, but do you think, as you kind of reflect on that, do you think that is a way to go? Just start by going with a GPO?
100%. And, a lot of what I've seen, a lot of people in my industry, and everybody wants to think they're the best negotiator in the world. And, I'm as good as I need to be, or maybe I get lucky sometimes. But what I like is if you can get past your ego and you can say, hey, look, how can I get out there and I can improve my organization at pace? What it allows you to do is adopt contracts that are already mostly negotiated. There's some nuances you can influence, but it's mostly done. So what it allows you to do is, specifically in a place like where I'm at, I can focus on adoption and change management.
Right.
Because I was introducing something brand new, and so I could focus on that, and then my compliance. So it allowed me to impact the organization and make things much more sticky. And I would tell you candidly, and again, I've been doing this a head full of hair. I would say there's some categories here that we can absolutely, I would say we are getting best. And we're doing that through an adoption. And that's, frankly speaking, that is being a part of the GPO and specifically through this OMNIA program.
So let's, we're going to jump into that head first, not jump into that head first in just a second. I want to just really quick make sure we level set. So Lanter Delivery Systems in a nutshell, just for the handful of people out there that hadn't heard of them. Johnathan, what do y'all do at the heart of the business?
So we deliver automotive parts, heavy tractor parts, heavy truck. We deliver that when most people are sleeping.
Okay.
We have 95% of our product we pick up this afternoon and evening, and will be delivered tomorrow morning by 8 a.m.
Okay, wonderful.
And so that is our role.
And folks can learn more at lanterdeliverysystems.com. Of course, we'll include that in the show notes. So Johnathan, you have jam-packed there. And Robert, I'm coming back to you for a quick second. Did you hear what he said? Because evidently biscuits and gravy are going to be the theme throughout. He said, don't sleep on OMNIA partners and don't sleep on biscuits and gravy there, right? Starting from scratch. So Robert, what else would you add? Johnathan was kind of describing the genesis of how you've worked together now, I think 14 months roughly. Elaborate a little bit more on that. And then Greg and I, we're going to take it kind of in a different direction in terms of what else GPOs can deliver. Robert, your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. And Johnathan's been a great partner. So we really strategically aligned with his vision, his goals and objectives, and really leverage the ecosystem within OMNIA. And when I say ecosystem, it's not just the categories that we have. We've got over 100 supplier partners that companies can leverage, but it's also other members that are going through similar experiences. We've got lots of experience with people, process, technology, and can help provide some avenues to improve on those and some guidance and connect with other members that have the unbridled feedback of the good, bad, and ugly of what they've gone through, right? Of any sort of initiative. So, I think there is untapped value there, just leveraging that entire ecosystem, not just the kind of the pre-negotiated contracts that we have to bear.
Love that. Okay, that's perfect foreshadowing for where we want to take the conversation next. And Greg, as you know, and many of our listeners may know, we recently conducted a great webinar-focused conversation, really dialed in on the value GPOs bring to the table, in particular when it comes to helping business leaders mitigate their risks in this ever complex environment. And, to piggyback on what Robert shared in the last point there, Greg, one of our favorite phrases that came out of that conversation was 3 bids and a cloud of dust. Greg, speak to what Mark was sharing in that conversation, and I'll keep moving forward with our guests here.
Yeah, so that that's sort of the old school way of doing things, and I think there's value in that, of course, but it doesn't have to always be that way. And I think what we've seen is this evolution of companies to leverage the group, right? We talked about that the other day on that webinar. Leverage the power of the group, because I think we talked about $2 million categories that companies have shared that they don't even look at. They can't even really adequately manage because that's a relatively low amount of spend for some companies, right? But imagine whatever that threshold is for a particular company, that's that's a even lower amount relative to the total at OMNIA. But think about this: they have 100 customers with a $500,000 or $2 million category. So it adds up to be something meaningful for them, and it allows them to put the appropriate resources behind it and make sure that gets managed appropriately. So that's what should we call that, Scott? That's the what's the new type of offense? That's the RPO. The GPO is the RPO, right? The run pass option offense.
We'll go with it. Maybe Robert's coming back to share some Bears.
RPO. That's a lot of O's.
And Greg, there's value to managing that category strategy, right? Because 3 bids and a cloud of dust, there's diminishing returns on that strategy, right? It works on a transactional buy, but if it's a recurring spend, what you'll notice is what you bought last year isn't necessarily what you're going to buy next year or the following year, or definitely in year 3 of that contract. Right, so you'll see some price creep, some diminishing returns if you just shelve that contract in the top drawer and never see it again. And the supplier is going to make it up on the back end, right?
Yeah, of course they are.
A highly profitable account. Whereas we actively manage the agreement, make sure that it's market competitive every day of the week. But more importantly, we're making sure that we're driving program improvements through the life cycle of that contract. So you're actually seeing continuous improvement and continuous value being delivered year over year. And we report on that to help our members, just put it up the chain so they could see the shareholder return or EBITDA improvement that we're helping drive towards the organization.
And you can see through the cost to quality as well, because when you do that 3 bids and a cloud of dust, you always find a new sucker every year. Nobody falls for it twice, right? So you have inconsistent quality, as you were talking about, or maybe even inconsistent products. And, because every vendor thinks we'll get in there with low price, and price is a huge part of the decision-making almost all the time. We'll get in there with a low price and then we'll be able to build something up. Well, sometimes they can't. And when they find they can't, they don't bid again next year. So you don't have that consistency a lot of times.
So, Johnathan, you were going to add something to here, this discussion.
Oh, sorry, Johnathan.
Okay.
No problem at all. I was just going to say, more than the price, they're managing the relationship and allows you to build a relationship. And more than anything, I think if the last couple of years have taught us anything, relationship matters, and relationship with your suppliers matters.
Yeah.
So,
excellent point.
I think somebody said at the beginning of the COVID outbreak, it's too late to make friends now. Right? If you've mistreated or haven't been in touch with a particular supplier, it's too late now. So yeah, and I think that's really, really important, because you guys mentioned the term customer of choice, right? You are that customer of choice simply by virtue of being part of a GPO. And I think that's important. They manage the relationship, and then you get the waterfall effect of that.
That's right. All right, so let me jump in here. Because Greg, you and Johnathan, the point you made there, relationships matter. That has been a steady drumbeat, common theme through, 1,000 episodes here at Supply Chain Now. So, and that's a great silver lining to what we've been through, right? I think there's going to be a lot of good being created and value being created because of those lessons learned. Okay, so as I was teeing up this segment, and then we dove into a lot of goodness there, been there, done that goodness. We really want to pick your brain, Johnathan, to come back to you first. Is your perspective on how GPO, you were a moment ago, you saw Johnathan, he was backing up that Lanter delivery systems truck to the deck. It was chock full of a bunch of experiences and lessons learned, and he was about to unload it. Now is the time, Johnathan. So talk to us about how you've seen, GPOs, OMNIA partners in this case, really help, your organization and you as a business leader through this really complex environment.
Yeah, so if you look at certain categories, we work at pace. We call it Lanter pace, which means we work pretty fast. We take a lot of pride in being adaptive and taking our customers' demands and trying to solve them. But what that does is it doesn't allow a lot of time for a lot of, well, let's stretch this out to multiple months, or we need to make change. And when we do that, it needs to, like, if I think about adoption, it needs to be relatively easy, so I don't disrupt my operations team who are on a mission to take care of our customers. And so if I look at the first couple things we tackle, if you look at MRO, you look at office supplies, you look at our rental car programs, okay, and travel. These are categories, and you were talking about that small spend. I call that, as a consultant, we call that the tail spend, and that tail spend, and these are important categories, but they're relatively easy adoptions. So you can come in, you can leverage, an Office Depot contract. Let's just say you come in there, or a national enterprise contract, and you can get really good aggressive pricing, but you can get a relationship that supports the mission of your organization. So it is a fast way of coming in and making an impact. And so that's what we learned. Because again, I'm trying to, who's this, this long-winded country boy coming in here trying to impact our organization? And what it did is it let me show significant double-digit gains, okay, based compared to what we were able to get on our own. Do it at pace, and do it where it was relatively easy to adopt. And so that, to me, was what we've been able to accomplish in short order. I don't know if I answered the question exactly. But.
No, you did. You really did. And by the way, new moniker, the Waylon Jennings of global supply chain, right here, and Johnathan Gregg. I'm not sure where Waylon Jennings grew up. I'm a bet Arkansas or somewhere in that region, but Johnathan, keep it coming.
There's no shortage of long-winded country boys in Nashville either, by the way.
All right. So a lot of good, that speed to change, that speed to value, that is so valuable, regardless if you're a startup or if you're a medium-sized business, or, enterprises don't, enterprises, big global organizations don't change, they turn like aircraft carriers. However, initiatives within them, that speed is really, really important. So I appreciate you sharing there. So Robert, piggybacking on what he shared there, in terms of that speed to value, or what else do you see GPOs in general bringing value to the table?
Oh, sure. When we speak about speed to value, one of the biggest hurdles to get there is typically data, especially in the indirect world, and especially in a lot of the categories that we discussed, and especially when it's a brand new organization. So, and typically, if you're doing it on your own, it's a chicken and the egg. You got to get good data to get a good contract, right? But you can't get the data until you get some sort of program in place, right? So what do? Well, we help cut through that, and it doesn't matter what your spend is. It could be 100,000, could be $1 million, could be 10 million. We've got pre-negotiated programming. You're getting the best pricing that's out there. So we can help solve for that data complexity. But we also want to make sure, because it's an important part of change management, right? Because if you don't know what the value that you're delivering is, and if you don't have any data, it's hard to kind of sell it to the stakeholders. I'm also an ex-consultant, or I would actually call myself a current consultant within the role that I'm in. But you can have the best program in the world, but if your stakeholders aren't on board, if you can't sell it to your stakeholders, you're not going to have any adoption or compliance, which is a big topic today. So I'm always a big fan of getting some sort of data, right? Let's go figure it out. Let's find out who a major stakeholder is, a major influencer that'll help advocate on behalf of the program if we could deliver that value prop to that stakeholder. So let's have some sort of baseline, and with a key influencer, make sure that there's value that will hit the bottom line, and that we could report on it through the program, ongoing program execution. And then we have a business case so that the organization could be on board, and then any stakeholders that are maybe laggards on that technology curve, so to speak, we can help guide them along, because it's clear and undoubtable that there's value and benefit to them in the program. And so I always like the clear hurdles, because without clearing those hurdles, that kind of diminishes the value and makes things a lot harder at the end of the process.
Well, and Greg, I'm gonna get your take here, but one of the things I heard you speaking to there, Robert, is the power of confidence to add that velocity, right? Confidence in data, confidence in the direction, you name it. I mean, that really helps helps build trust in the path that we're going and speeds it up in many ways. Greg, what did you hear there between what Johnathan shared and Robert shared?
Well, we talk about this a lot. It's leverage, right? I mean, it's the power of the group. It's the power of being part of something really, really big and having something really, really big be part of your organization. You can benefit from the relationships. You can benefit from the economic effect, right? We called it scale economies shared. This is, as we talked about the other day, this is the best kind of business. That's the Googles, the Amazons, the Costcos, the Walmarts, right? The Ford Motor Company, who took an $800 car down to a $200 car because of production efficiencies and shared that with their customers. In this case, that's exactly what GPOs and OMNIA in particular are doing with their members. Is they're taking the power of scale economies and sharing that with all their members, and it's every single one of those scale economies. That may be, of course, fiscal, right? It's certainly relationship, but there are all kinds of other benefits as well. It's also the input of the other members of the organization, where you can share ideas, share thoughts, or learn from the things that OMNIA learns from all of those varied businesses that they work with.
Well said, Greg. Very holistic. Okay, so I want to move forward, kind of forward looking here. Johnathan, tell us about what's coming next for Lanter delivery systems. And really quick, before you do, as we talked about pre-show, I keep wanting to add a constant N on the front end. And here on the tail end of Halloween, has anyone ever been the Green Lanter at the organization? Because if not, someone needs to step up and dress up as a Green Lantern next year. But anyway,
the Green Lanter.
Right. I digress. Sorry, my son. I can picture my son Ben getting a kick out of that. But all right. So kidding aside, as we look into 2023 and beyond, I mean, clearly y'all have come so far, Johnathan, with some of the cool things you're doing, both what you're leading, what you're leveraging Robert and the whole OMNIA Partners team to do. What's next? What's next for the organization?
Yeah. So I want to build off a point you just made and talk about our go forward. For me, there's, my old man used to say that there's only so much of yourself you can sell in any given day. Make sure you're selling it to the right people. But mentally, there's only so much time I can focus on any given category, and I touch all of the categories. And what the GPO allows me to do is put some and focus my team on adoption, while I focus my attention on maybe bigger, more strategic programs that are outside the GPO as well. So it's what time they buy me in mental space that allows me to impact. So when I go forward, we're focusing on a couple of things. We're focused on a couple strategic things that are outside the GPO program, but I'm also working inside and partnering with Rob and the team of what I call second pass. We're still making first pass on certain categories, but we're going to come through and we're going to, if you look at safety vest, right now, yes, I'm getting a better price through my MRO supplier, but what I'm able to do now is optimize on where do I get within that SKU that best vest that meets my safety requirements in that. So I'm going to focus in on that. And that is where we're going to see, and then focus on where my leakage is. And then, where and why. And have an honest question on why. And the great thing I love about OMNIA and this program is we can say, well, we're hearing this. And I have a partner, almost like a big brother, to help me solve that. I'm not trying to solve everything by myself. I'm collaborating to find that. So it gives me the mental space on these other areas, but also these tail categories are where this leakage. So that's what is next for us.
No sitting on laurels there at all. Greg, I'm going to get your comment in just a second. But I'll give Robert an opportunity to speak to that first. And Robert, I'd love for you to speak to what Johnathan just shared there. But as a quick follow-up, I'd love for you to speak to are all the, Johnathan gets it clearly. Are all the folks that you're working with as, I don't want to say evolved, but, as savvy as Johnathan in his ability?
Yeah, not everybody is as quick and agile as Johnathan. He's been a great partner in looking to drive significant value in a fairly quick amount of time. And he's very collaborative and very open and transparent, with the good and also the areas for improvement. And we appreciate that, because we all have areas for improvement that we need to recognize. And if we don't recognize, we can't improve upon, right? So he's been a great partner from that perspective. I wish everybody was like Johnathan.
I'm with you. And it looks like the path ahead is going to have plenty of the more of the same, but more of the new as well, right, Robert?
Yeah, I would kind of break it off into three tranches. One is within OMNIA, because of the partnership that we have with Lanter, we're actually looking to invest in like a spend visibility tool to help identify spend under management, where that leakage is, and really help develop strategies on driving that compliance / adoption. But first, we got to recognize where it is, develop a plan to address, and then go upon and execute upon it, as well as provide some resources to help with the execution of that. Secondly is the continuous improvement over the programs that we do have implemented. So now we have some data, some good data for 20 categories that we've worked with Johnathan on. And so now, is there a better way, right? And so we'll start doing some data mining and then identify, is there a better cost option? Is there some OEMs that we could go back and get a second level of discount by being able to leverage some spend with specific OEMs? Demand consumption reduction, et cetera. So there's a whole continuous improvement strategy that I would consider part of that second tranche. And then third, there may be some new areas that we partner on, like facility services or maybe IT that we can work together on for a new wave of opportunity. But first, we got to solidify the foundation of what we built first so that we can build upon it.
Okay, man. Greg, lots of clarity between these two here. Your thoughts on what they just shared?
I think the best thing about what Robert and Johnathan are talking about is you don't have to be Johnathan to benefit, and it's probably better for you. I mean, from a relative impact standpoint, if you're not a Johnathan, right? If you're a Billy Bob, which Johnathan you must have met, I know I did in Springfield, but if you're not as adept as Johnathan, you're not as visionary, you're not as educated, but or evolved. I like evolved, by the way, that term. I think you can get even more benefit if you can't have the focus or don't have the strategic ability. That's something that a GPO can help you with as well, right? The foresight or the vision of what procurement could be for your organization and what other things you could be spending your time on if you're not spending it on, got to say it again, 3 bids and a cloud of dust.
And Greg, you have a good point there, right? What we're trying to help accomplish is taking some of the tactical things off people's plates, right? And help them become more strategic and focus on driving significant value creation across the organization. And we're a tool in that tool set to help them become more strategic, right?
Yeah.
Okay, man, I love that. All right, so we're coming down the home stretch here because I'm either going to go get some Phil's Pizza or I'm going to get Grandma Foster's biscuits and gravy, one or the other for lunch here today. But Robert, I want to pose this next question to you because as we talked about at pre-show, there is a wonderful movement afoot for years now where, much like years ago, supply chain finally got a seat at the table and gotten recognized for the value it really brings and how much it is the business. Well, procurement's seen a lot of that as well now, which is great. A wonderful development. This conversation has really been speaking to the power of procurement in a very forward-looking way. So I'm going to go around the panel and get everybody's take here. So what are your thoughts? I will stick with you, Robert, on the evolving role, evolvement maybe, the evolving role and perception of the procurement function, I'll call it.
Oh, sure. I'm going to leverage some of my other experiences. I'm also past president of ISM here in Chicago and helped start a procurement executive roundtable over the past few years. And so what we've seen is supply chain and procurement has really helped companies that utilize it in an appropriate way, make that a strategic advantage for their company in the marketplace. All right. And Greg had mentioned a couple examples earlier, right? What Ford did, and the Costco's and the Walmarts, their business cases for when you unlock the power of supply chain and procurement. You basically kind of take over your industry by being able to turn that into competitive advantage, right? Because you're able to, have better cost products, better value products, can deliver it. I need it in an hour, and a drone pops up and gets me what I need. Right? That's kind of where the industry is going.
That's right.
And so not only are we getting the seat to the table, so to speak, but making sure that we utilize it to become that strategic advantage and help our companies accelerate in our industries.
Well said. And those savvy C-level leaders and other leaders are taking more advantage. They're seeing the light, and they're leaning into the value offering you just spoke to there, Robert. Johnathan, what are your thoughts along the same lines? Folks are finally having the eureka moments on the impact that procurement expertise can have.
I think it's an interesting time. So, as you pointed out earlier in the conversation, early part of the the COVID periods, people figured out that relationship that maybe they had been neglecting really did matter, and they treated that three clouds. And to me, that bid and three clouds and you burn the relationships and you move on. You've now burned a relationship. Even if you don't award business, keeping a relationship with that supplier, and explaining, taking the time to explain why you didn't do that so that you keep that. But I think what's evolving and what's coming is how many people forget those lessons. So if we do have a recessionary period, I made the brilliant career decisions to go into the heavy construction industry in May of 2008. Not a more lovely business to be in. But it was, I learned a lot of lessons about that period and how we treated our suppliers as our business really struggled to stay alive. And as companies, if there is, uncertainty in a company, how they treat them, because, when I was at a big carrier, we had a saying that said shippers had long memories, but so do carriers, and so do your suppliers. So I think when you've spent the last couple of years in saying, hey, we're in this together, I need you, we're partners, right? How you treat them and how you treated them in that bid and how you treated them when things maybe flip the other way in your favor, I think that's what's coming. I think we're going to say, okay, do these scars stay with us? Or are we just going to rip off that Band-Aid and act like it didn't happen? I think that's what's going to be interesting.
Well said, Johnathan. Like baseball closers, we can add them to that list. They have to have a terrible memory. Greg, it's interesting to hear Robert and Johnathan speak to kind of the evolving role and influence and presence of procurement out there in the C-suite. What's your thoughts here, Greg?
I think there's still a lot of room for improvement, frankly. I mean, as much as people in the procurement industry or segment, whatever you want to call it, have seen a lot of that, I think there's still a lot of room for enlightenment in the executive suite. And I think, you have to keep pressing. It's very similar with supply chain, and it was very similar maybe with procurement, but very similar with supply chain as we started to come out of the disruptions of the pandemic, for people to backslide into their old ways, right? And I think you have to keep the spotlight on the fact that this is such a powerful portion of your business. And I think, again, the difficulty that Johnathan, you described there in maintaining the relationships, but also maintaining the focus on improvement. I think that's just another case for why you would outsource this. And I think more and more businesses will do that over time. We talk about this a lot. The new brands, the new retailers, they are buying companies or outsourcing to companies and letting those companies run on their own, gaining the benefit of that, those shared economies, and sort of doing what they do best, right? I know Lanter has a lot of internal skills, but that what they do best is deliver parts, right? And it also allows you that freeing strategic discussion that we had earlier. It allows not just Johnathan to do that, but the entire organization, and whatever your organization is, to focus more on your core values and on your core gifts and skills, right? And strengths, and make those stronger if you don't have to worry so much about some of these other things that are really super complex and hard to master and hard to staff for and hard to scale in your business. It's just so much better to be able to have someone create a great skill set for you and the scale of those relationships, and allow you to focus a lot more on your core. So you don't have to have 25 people in procurement. I don't know what size your organization is, but Johnathan, but having started from scratch, it's probably fairly small if you went immediately to a GPO. And even if you have all those people can be doing more strategic things like you talked about.
Absolutely. It goes to the heart of building more competitive advantage in the business. So I love that, Greg. Great comment there. And Johnathan, Robert, I really appreciate y'all weighing in on what we're seeing, some of the trends out there in terms of the rise of procurement. I'm not going to be dramatic, but it's been cool to see the last few years. Okay. So I want to make sure, folks, as we start to wind down here today, I want to make sure folks know how to connect with you both, whether they want to compare notes with you. Johnathan, whether they want to have you come in and speak to their group or association or something, and Robert, if they want to sit down and have a meaningful conversation with you and kick the tires on the OMNIA Partners value prop. So Johnathan, let's start with you. So as we mentioned earlier, the company website, lanterdeliverysystems.com. And how can folks connect with you?
I would say LinkedIn's probably the best path. Just shoot me a connection, shoot me a message. Happy to have a conversation.
Over a hot cup of Dunkin' coffee, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Love it. We really appreciate your time with us here, Johnathan. Robert, same question to you. And how can folks connect with you? How can they connect with OMNIA Partners? And tell us about this, just how easy it is to get started, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My contact information is there. It's probably the easiest way to share. If you want to learn more about OMNIA Partners, it's omniapartners.com, so fairly easy to remember. And then it's free to join. No commitments, no obligations. So it's fairly easy, especially in the enterprise space. We have to earn our value every day, right, and every year. So we try to make sure that we tailor our strategy to meet our members' objectives, and so we try to make it as easy as possible and eliminate all hurdles. Okay,
so Greg, on the webinar earlier that we referenced earlier, a lot of folks were surprised at that in terms of being able to join for free. That's quite it's like they'll prove it. They're willing to prove it, huh?
We're willing to prove it. I mean, we need to eat our own dog food, Scott. Let's seriously, we're signing up. We're signing up, Robert.
Let's do it. Well, hey, really enjoyed today's conversation. It was really touched on a lot of different aspects, both procurement related and general business and leadership and change and innovation related. So big thanks to Johnathan Foster, Senior Director of Procurement with Lanter Delivery Systems. Thank you, Johnathan. Robert Mietus, Managing Director for Central for OMNIA Partners. Robert, thanks so much.
I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
You bet.
Thanks, gentlemen.
But hey, we're not going to let y'all go just yet because I want to put Greg on the spot here. We've covered so much ground.
You're going to make them listen to that, aren't you?
Yes, I've got to. Because, I've got about my 17 pages of notes here between Johnathan and Robert's expertise and experiences and whatnot. But Greg, as we wrap here, what if folks forget everything else, what's the one thing that our listeners have got to leave this conversation with in mind?
Well, I've said this before, and we do talk about this internally. It's group. Purchasing organization, that's valuable, but group is the power here, right? The power of bringing everyone together, of having all of these external organizations creating these shared economies, right? And allowing you to leverage the power of that huge group. It takes a village thing, but it's much bigger than a village, and it's much more interactive than that because everybody has one common interest, right? Their procurement, and we're focused on a singular thing as this group, and it is incredibly powerful. And I mean it when we say we're doing it, because it's just too powerful for us, and it's I think of this as our business case, Scott, right? This is something that I think you and I, in particular, possibly two of the worst negotiators. The only way Scott and I can win at negotiating is negotiating with each other, and then we both lose, which I guess is a win. But I think that, for organizations as small as ours, less than $10 million a year in sales, or as big as Sony, who obviously needs some procurement help, Robert, right? Because for 3 years they have not been able to produce enough of their PS5 consoles, and it's the same issue every year. They can't get supply. So I dare you to go get them, Robert.
Let's go. I'll give you an update after the
but it is. I mean, even companies that size can benefit from this just because of the focus and, again, the power of that scale economy.
That's right. Well, couldn't say it better. So I really have enjoyed today's conversation. Hey, we're going to change that cliche. It takes an ecosystem. And once you have the ecosystem, hey, leverage it for all the good that it can bring. So this conversation's really been a testament to that. So again, big thanks to Johnathan and Robert and Greg. Big thanks to all of our listeners out there. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. But hey, it's not about just listening and taking it in. It's about taking action, doing something with it, right? Deeds, not words. On that note, on behalf of our entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton signing off for now, challenging you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change. And we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.